Welcome into episode 272 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. The NHL All-Star break has come and gone. Bridget and Scott, when is the Bruins' first game back from break?
Ooh, yeah, apparently Thursday. Apparently not Tuesday.
Yeah, no, they had a bit of a no-show at the Garden on Tuesday against the Flames. They lose 4-1. Not a whole lot of good to take away from that game. Nonetheless, Bridget and Scott, we will still have opening shifts, so let's get right to them.
Can I go?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go for it.
Okay, mine. It's real quick, Scott, so we'll get to you in about 10 seconds. My opening shift is just blah. Like, that was just the most blah game I've watched in a long time. And Scott and I were up. I was in the second period. I was like, this is the most boring second period I've watched in forever. And he was like, no, this whole game has been like that. So, I mean, just blah, meh. That's my opening shift. I was leaving the Garden. I was like, I don't even know what we're going to talk about tomorrow. It was just so meh.
Hey, at least we did get one great game at the Garden this week. For people not watching on YouTube, I'm pointing at my BU hat. The BUBC and the Beanpot was great. Yeah, Bruins, Flames, not so much.
It almost wasn't great though. Like it started out all BU, and then all of a sudden, BC was like, "Oh yeah, there's a game tonight," and they almost upset Scott. He was up on the 9th floor, just losing his mind.
Yeah, I mean, Macklin Celebrini really kind of showed. There were a lot of eyes on that weekend home and home series. I think he scored in the final minute of the second game, but he wasn't really. I wouldn't say he was dominant. He wasn't. You didn't watch him in that weekend series and be like, "Oh yeah, he's like the future first overall pick in the NHL." He just looked like a really good player out there. But in that Beanpot semifinal game, it was. Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, he's better than all the rest. Yep, you got a freshman line of first rounders on BC, and they aren't at his level, even them.
Yeah, and then he swears on live TV.
Right. Yeah, I mean that second goal was insane. No goalie is stopping that.
Yeah, and like he had a couple chances like that in that weekend series too, and just didn't bury them. But it's like. You can only give him so many of those before he's going to. Like it's going to be inevitable at some point. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, unfortunately, we do have to talk about the Bruins more than the Beanpot here. So my opening shift ties into I think certainly one of the main takeaways from that game, and something that a lot of the social media conversation is centered around was the lack of physical response from the Bruins after. Brad Marchand got cross-checked in the face by Martin Pospisil, who was ejected from the game, 5-minute major game misconduct. And then Marchand was also high-sticked later in the game. Little cut above his lip. That was by Mackenzie Weegar. And for me, like, okay, sure, maybe you wanted the Bruins to be more physical. Pospisil got ejected from the game. It's not like you really had a chance to do anything there. Weegar sitting in the box for 4 minutes. You can't get immediate revenge there. Where you can really get revenge is on the scoreboard because it ended up being a 3-minute power play on the Pospisil one instead of 5 because Marchand was also called for a slash before he got cross-checked. But you get that power play. They do absolutely nothing with it. Didn't even create any good looks. And then the high stick gives them a 5-on-3. They do score on the 5-on-3, but they still have 3.5 minutes left on the double minor after that. Great chance to tie the game. And instead, what happens? They get a too many men in the ice penalty. There goes the rest of that power play. Huberdeau scores on the 4-on-4, and now it's 3-1, and the Flames are running away. That kind of just summed up the game where the Bruins are just shooting themselves in the foot. And even when the Flames seemed determined to give them an opening to get back in the game, they just couldn't take advantage. And you can chalk it up to first game out of break if you want, but I don't really think that's much of an excuse because the Flames had the same exact break and they also had to travel. So, maybe that explains the start, but it doesn't explain all 60 minutes.
Well, and I think that sometimes it is easier for the road team, though, after a break because it's like, okay, this is a business trip. And, the guys that are at home have just gotten comfortable in, came back from Florida or the Bahamas and they were like in this relaxed mode and there was nothing to like spring them back into business mode. But like when you get all your stuff packed together and you get on a plane, it's like, this is a business trip. Sometimes it is easier for the road team when things start back up. That's just what I've heard from a bunch of people. And also the Marchand getting hit in the face twice thing. Fluto asked him after the game and Marchand thought that he was joking because Fluto was like, where did Weegar get you in the face? And he was like, can't you see? Because his nose was all like bloody and like his lip was bleeding and like, and no, he's like, no, really. And he's like, it was his mouth. But yeah, Marchand's whole face was not, and I've gotten into the bad habit of asking players after the game, how's your face? So I didn't want to ask this time. But like Matt Poitras, when he had his nose like bleeding everywhere, and DeBrusk when he had stitches in his chin, I just like in the scrum, like, how's your face? So I was like, I can't do that again.
Yeah. So of course, anytime, guys are, scraping aloe vera out of their elbow pads after a vacation, you kind of question maybe if it's going to be a good game or not. And Scott, I like what you said. Like, obviously it could potentially explain the start, but not the whole 60 minutes. It was definitely a concern of mine because it took a break, the Christmas break for the Bruins to snap out of a funk that they were in. And they were playing phenomenal hockey in the time since then. And I was a little bit weary heading into the All-Star break that it could potentially be the opposite effect, where now they have a break and it's going to, affect their momentum that they created. End of the day, it's February, so they have time to. It's about creating that momentum again by the time April comes around. But yeah, it was a pretty lackluster effort all the way around. My opening take is I'm curious as to where you guys feel the lines may have should have, if you were comfortable with the lines that Montgomery went with last night out of the All-Star break, because the game before the All-Star break, they played in Philadelphia. And that game, you saw JVR with Zacha and Pastrnak. And Pastrnak, it was one of those games where he was like, yeah, I'm one of the best players in the world. I'm going to do whatever I want. And Zacha and Van Riemsdyk played well alongside with him. And the reason that they were together was because of some injuries up front. I think Jake DeBrusk may have been out that game, and maybe a couple of others. But anyway, so against Calgary, Montgomery kept Van Riemsdyk, Zacha, and Pastrnak together, which meant Marchand with Coyle and DeBrusk. Marchand, Coyle, and Pastrnak were playing really well as a line, I felt, the couple of weeks leading into the All-Star break. I'm curious if you guys feel like maybe that would have been a better lineup coming out of the break, or if you don't really care, it is what it is. It's a long season. They're just jumbling the lines again.
Yeah, going into it, I would have thought either way was fine. So, I'm not gonna second guess myself, because I would have thought whatever he chooses is fine. Both were playing well. Like, it's hard to argue against keeping Van Riemsdyk, Zacha, Pastrnak together when they just had a game where, or I say just, I mean a week ago, had a game where they literally scored on 4 straight shifts. I absolutely understand the temptation to keep that together and see if maybe they can sort of keep that magic rolling. He ended up changing lines like midway through the second period anyways, because obviously they had nothing going offensively. I don't think the line change helped. I don't think anything would have helped on this night, honestly. Like, this is one of those games where, yeah, lineup combinations always matter to an extent, but this was just like a team-wide, to use Bridget's word, blah. Like, just a total breakdown across the board. No one had it. I don't think you'd be hard-pressed to highlight anyone who had a good game. I mean, I guess I noticed like Jacob Lauko had a few good shifts and at least seemed to have some energy. But even that's like a little bit of a stretch. Even Swayman was off, especially the fourth goal he gives up, like the one that really ends the game, essentially. It's a soft backhander from a low angle from Noah Hannafin, and somehow he gets
no one even knew it went in, because it was just like such a random shot, and then it squeezed right through him. It just snuck its way in, and even like the broadcasters were like, oh, it's in. And I'm pretty sure that there was no reaction from the fans either. Like usually the fans would be like, "Oh," it was like there was nothing. I was like, nobody had any idea that puck went in, but it should have been stopped.
Yeah.
By the way, guys, not to like distract from what we're talking about, but I still cannot figure this out. What what people don't know is that I got delivered flowers like literally as we were about to start recording this. They're right here. If you're watching on YouTube, and I have no idea who sent me this or why, because it's not Valentine's Day yet, and I do not have a boyfriend. And it's spelled wrong. It's spelled Proxl.
Wasn't Melvin, was it?
Close. I mean, maybe.
Is there a couple of paw prints on there?
There's nothing. Wait, is there an inside? There's nothing. Oh my god. I don't know who sent me these. I don't know. Did any of you send me these?
Yeah, I was gonna say it could be a listener, could be a YouTube commenter. Like
usually I get flowers like if I was like in the hospital or like if I had a boyfriend, which I don't. So these are a mystery, but they're lovely.
Maybe it was Don's weenie.
Bridget also got a sunflower at the Bruins game Tuesday night for Women in Sports Night.
Oh, I should have put that down here with it. I wasn't expecting it though. Sorry, I'm still just. I'm gonna spend the rest of the day trying to figure out who this is from. So.
I mean, honestly, it's more interesting than that Bruins game. So
it really is. Okay, so I don't feel that bad.
And Scott's Jekyll and Hyde fandom with Creed, I think, is also more interesting than the game.
This wasn't it. This was one of the most random pre-podcast discussions that we had.
Yeah, because it started with Brian randomly bringing up Creed and asking Scott if he was a fan, and then being very disappointed that Scott said no, not anymore. Then my doorbell rang. My dog freaked out. Flowers showed up. I don't know.
I don't know what it was. Like I just had some sort of like voice in my head that just said, "Ask Scott if he likes Creed." There was no thought that went into it. There was not. It literally. I had a thought and I asked it. I spoke on it, and we started talking about Super Bowl performances and Rihanna being pregnant and killing it last year, but I don't know, whatever. Okay.
And the answer, because I'm sure listeners are just dying to know, is that I can't say I'm really a Creed fan, but I'm also not a hater. Like Creed's one of those bands where like along with Nickelback, where it's like people want to hate them, love to hate them, and it's like that to me is even more annoying than people who like love them. It's like whatever, like who cares? If people like them, that's fine. I can't say they're my cup of tea, but
yeah,
I'm not freaking out if Higher comes on. Like I'll
see
out to that. Like
I see. I was just gonna say, like, if anybody says they don't like Creed and they're by themselves in the car and that comes on, I guarantee the windows are going down, the music, the radio is going up. So, and you can't tell me otherwise. Everybody is a closeted Creed fan. Well, I proudly admit that I'm a Creed fan.
You can change your opening shift if you like. Everyone's a closeted Creed fan. But.
Well, so stemming on, I want to get to the defense as well, because a lot of times this Bruins offense starts from the back end, and last night was not a good showing for anybody in the team, and there's some personnel issues last night on the blue line. There's injuries and whatnot, but I want to get to the defense. But before I do, I'm looking at the lines that the Bruins put out last night, and the third line was Lauko with Frederick and Geeky. I'm curious, do you guys feel like that's the one line right now on the Bruins where I look at somebody and I say they're clearly like playing higher in the lineup, right? And that's Jacob Lauko. And nothing, no disrespect to him. I don't believe he's a third liner, certainly not right now. And I'm curious, do you feel like there's again, before it's springtime, should the Bruins find a way to like call up Fabian Lysell for like a couple of games just to throw him on a third line left wing and see if he can just like do anything for a game or two? Is that wasted asset management? I don't see the harm in that. If Lauko is going to be in your third line left wing, why not put Lysell there for a couple of games? I don't know if the cap allows it, or I don't know. That just popped into my head as well.
Yeah, that's a possibility. What I would say is even more of an immediate possibility, assuming his injury isn't too serious, is plugging Poitras in on that line. Frederic left wing, Geeky right wing. And there's a third line like I would like to see them take a look at. And our last episode during last week during the break was a mailbag, and we actually got several more questions after we recorded. I think we probably weren't entirely clear on when questions were due, so we'll take some blame there. But one of them from Mark was all about Poitras and kind of where he slots in. Is he going to be stuck on the fourth line? Do you have to move him up? Well, Jim Montgomery talked about Poitras after Tuesday's morning skate and was asked, okay, when he does come back, because he's still dealing with a little bit of a nagging injury, is it like you put him on the fourth line and he has to work his way up? And Montgomery, I think really for the first time in a while, said, well, ideally it's not the fourth line. Ideally it's a little higher in the lineup and a little more of an offensive situation. And that was immediately what I thought is like, okay, right now you have Lauko on the third line. Brian, you're right. That's a line higher than he probably should be. That's immediately what I thought. It's like, well, that's where you put Poitras. If you want to try to get Poitras a little higher in the lineup anyways, there's a clear opening. And I know Morgan Geeky has played well as a center, but I think he makes that switch to wing pretty seamlessly. Having both him and Frederic with Poitras really helps with a lot of that defensive responsibility. It doesn't have to be all Poitras, coming down low in the defensive zone all the time. So I would like to see that when he returns to the lineup, whether that's Thursday or Saturday. I guess we'll probably get more information after Thursday's morning skate. The Bruins are completely off on Wednesday, so there won't be any update then. But even before, I do think Lysell could get a look at some point because he's been playing really well in Providence. He's kind of been on a bit of a heater there. I know, people probably stopped paying attention a little bit after those critical comments from Ryan Mougenel, but that was now a couple months ago at this point. And Lysell's, really kind of turned things around and gotten going since then.
Yeah, and Georgi Merkulov just came off the AHL All-Star game. So he's been still doing pretty well. But I want to talk about Poitras being on that line and Frederic Poitras Geeky line, I think actually has some decent potential. That's a line of three centers because Frederic was a center in college, can play center. Defensively, he is very solid, and he's become a pretty good 200-foot player, and that basis comes around being a center. And then Geeky, same thing. So we're talking about usually your center is your most like defensively sound forward on a line. In this case, if Poitras is your center, he's not, but that's okay because you have Geeky and Frederic there as well, and it gives him a little bit of extra leeway to learn from two guys that are more experienced and can also have his back if he needs it. But they're also bigger guys than him, which I think helps. And Frederic, at times, Poitras has gotten pushed around a little bit, and I think Frederic being out there with him helps with that in different situations. Not all the time, obviously, but if need be, if he's on the ice with him, I think that helps. So I think that line could have a pretty decent dynamic because I actually think that Poitras is a very smart passer, but Geeky is also a really smart just hockey player in general. We've seen him go to different spaces on the ice, find ways to get open. And also some of his passing has been creative. So I think that there could be an interesting dynamic with Poitras and Geeky. And Frederick's just a really hard worker, and we've seen him start to bloom. And you don't want to see a combination that hinders Frederic at all, though. So you have to keep an eye on that because Frederic actually has been one of your best producers recently. But I see potential for that line if that's the combination, if Poitras gets back in here the next game or two.
Yeah, and just a quick correction. Lysell, Scott, as you mentioned, is a right wing, not a left wing option. But just seeing the potential opening in that line, whether he's playing as offside or not, organizationally. But yeah, Poitras is the natural natural option there. And I agree with what you guys are saying. I did want to mention quickly, Scott, Mason Lohrei was down in Providence and left a game. Was there an update on the severity of that injury? Because last night, the Bruins lineup iced Matt Grzelcyk, Shattenkirk, and Forbort in the same lineup. And, based on their play this year, in a perfect world, I would like to see Wotherspoon and Lohrei getting 2 of those 3 spots in their top 6. But Lohrei, I believe, is potentially injured. Again, I don't know the severity.
Didn't he get a skate to the? He has a skate cut, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was to the leg, and Mark Diver yesterday tweeted that according to Evan Gold, who's the Providence Bruins GM, Bruins expect to get a better idea on the status of Mason Lohrei, who has a skate cut, after players return Thursday from the AHL All-Star break. So should be later this week. Obviously, that's always a scary situation when you're talking about a skate cut. We know Lauko had one to the face earlier this year. You hope it was relatively minor and didn't get a tendon or anything like that. But right now, no real update there.
And just the state of the Bruins blue line in general, like they had to make room with Forbort coming back, and just we all here agree, like it's great to have depth at defense, especially NHL caliber depth, right? It's never a bad thing to have a 7th, 8th guy that can. It's not a bad problem to have. It's not even a problem. But what's your opinion on their blue line as far as just personnel? Like what do you feel like is the best deep pairings you've seen this year, and just in terms of not just defensively, but again, creating offense from the D zone and transition? I just feel I've liked the way the Bruins lineup has looked this year, more so with Wotherspoon in there and Lohrei in there, as I have with Forbort and Shattenkirk at times. And Grzelcyk, Grzelcyk is a polarizing option because you can put him on the top pair with McAvoy, and you can also make the argument he's your 7th defenseman. So I don't know how to feel about him all the time, but certainly with Shattenkirk and Forbort, like I just feel like Wotherspoon and Lohrei, I think there's opportunity there, but when there's too many chefs in the kitchen, Don Sweeney has to make personnel decisions to abide by the cap and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's increasingly to me feeling like it's sort of the number one area they have to figure out leading up to the trade deadline. And we've talked about this a little, but it's like, I think Hampus Lindholm has come around. I'm not super concerned there. Like even if he's not playing to the level of last year, he's a really solid top 4 defenseman. But we've talked about it. Like Grzelcyk has been up and down this year. It's been an inconsistent season for him. Forbort has really been battling through injuries, and I don't think he's looked very good since he's come back.
I don't know if he's fully, like I honestly feel like the injury is just like it's still there. Like I don't know if it's how like some seasons there's a guy who plays through an injury that needs surgery, but they wait till the off season to get surgery. Like this kind of feels maybe like it's something like that because he's not been 100%.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Montgomery did clarify that the most recent game that Forbort missed, that Philly game, the last one before the All-Star break, was a different injury. He said it wasn't related to the same thing that's been lingering all year. That doesn't necessarily mean that other injury isn't still lingering. So
the luck has just not been there for him this year.
But yeah, right now their left side to me doesn't look good enough to make a deep run. Now can that change if you get Forbort healthy, if Grzelcyk really picks up his play? Sure, but you're running out of time quick. Like the trade deadline's a month away. So that decision on whether you need a real upgrade there has to come quick. Like that's not a lot of time for everything to kind of come together and really click and solidify your left side. So, whether it's that physical presence like Jake Middleton in Minnesota that we talked about, someone like that. I know Joel Edmondson's kind of another name that's started to surface who I'm not the biggest fan of. I think he's more of a third pairing guy at this point in his career. Or whether it's another puck mover, like, a guy we just saw who's probably going to get traded, Noah Hannafin, who's always been linked to the Bruins because he's a local guy. He's from here. There's teams and rumors of people who think even if he's not traded to the Bruins, he might want to sign there in the summer. So you look at that possibility. But yeah, like at this very moment, I feel like that's kind of the area they might need to upgrade the most before the trade deadline, but that could still change.
And to answer one of your questions as part of that, Brian, who's been like their best defensive pair? Doesn't it kind of have to be Lindholm Carlo recently? I feel like that's been their bet. Like more often than not, that's been a consistent pair, and that's two guys that you can rely on most.
And even they had a rough night too.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're kind of looking back to like right before the break, because this most recent game, like if we were doing who's up, who's down, just like throw them all in the down category, like just 100% down. But no, if we're talking about like the stretch before the break, I think Lindholm Carlo has, and it should be on paper and in reality, a nice reliable pair there, because those are two guys that are high skill, smart defenders. So.
Yeah, and I think that Noah Hannafin is a player, like we talked about him earlier this year. If there was a trade package for Noah Hannafin that featured like Lohrei or something like that, like we talked about how you make that trade because Lohrei like 23 and Hannafin's 26, and Hannafin's already an established top 4 guy in the NHL, has been for years. That said, I do think if you're trying to optimize this year's roster by giving up the least, like if you look internally, the Bruins on the blue line, they do have puck movers in McAvoy, in Lindholm, and in Lohrei, should they choose to implement him into their lineup, especially in the spring. What I fear they don't have internally is a very hard-nosed, tough to play against, earn every inch of the ice you get, third pair deep defense. And like I think you can. Okay, you bring Noah Hannafin in, you're getting a solid offensive defenseman that can move the puck and create offense from the D zone and transition. Lohrei can do that as well, but he's not a polished product defensively like Hannafin would be. But what they don't have is you bring in a Jacob Middleton or a Joel Edmondson, who, Scott, you're right, like he's nothing more than a third D man, third D pair guy. But I think that's what he was for St. Louis when they beat you for the cup. Like he was in and out of the lineup for that team. But the Bruins forwards didn't have much success going to the net with him out there, because he's 6'5" and loves to give you little cross checks to the ribs, and more the cross checks to the ribs that don't get called because they're kind of subtle. A Jacob Middleton in Minnesota, I think that's what the Bruins have enough high-end talent, I think, on the blue line. They need more of that attainable, affordable. I hate to use the word grit, but you need it, and I think that's what they should target. I think it'd be great to get Noah Hannafin, but to your point, Scott, you can get him later. I think when he hits free agency, I think the Bruins, you want to go for it because the team is strong and the record indicates that. But I still think they can optimize this roster without potentially making anything crazy happen in the asset department.
Yeah, and Middleton to me is that's the guy I'd much rather target than Edmondson, because I do think Middleton can play up in the lineup too. He's in Minnesota, his most common partner has been Jared Spurgeon, who's along with Jonas Brodin, their top defenseman minutes wise, and they've been very successful together. In San Jose before that, he was paired with Erik Karlsson, and that pairing was really the only good thing on an otherwise awful team. So he's a guy who's showing he can be a nice complement to a really high end player. And you look at Karlsson, you look at Spurgeon, and it's McAvoy's that kind of high end player. So perhaps Middleton could pair with him, even though like that might seem like a little too high in the lineup for Middleton on a Stanley Cup team. But if it works for 5-on-5 shifts, then who cares? Like he can pair with McAvoy and still not necessarily be playing like 24 minutes a game. Like he could still be around 20 minutes. So like he really intrigues me. He's also signed for another season, so it's possible that Minnesota might say, no, we're not trading him. Like we expect to be in it again next year, and he's part of our plans. So there's
it makes him more valuable. Like it could also make him a more valuable piece to move, because you're not like, okay, we're not going to give up our draft pick or whomever for somebody that's just going to walk in 2 months, So, it changes a little bit of the, like what you're willing to offer, I guess. Cause you're not gonna, it's not like, okay. Like, so if you think about the Bruins trade deadline last year, you add Bertuzzi for a first overall pick, but then he's gone, so it makes him a little bit more valuable that he could stick around for another season. And that's also the issue with Noah Hannafin. It's like, it would have to be like the Lindholm deal where they knew he was going to sign and extend.
Right.
So that's kind of where they would have to be. Like there would have to be an agreement there.
Yeah. And look, I think, and there's some NHL news we haven't gotten to yet, but it does have implications on the Bruins because it takes away from possibilities for them. But I think it helps them direct their targets going forward. So Elias Lindholm goes from Calgary to Vancouver. He's off the board. We've been talking about him for months now about potentially dating back to the preseason, offseason. He's gone. Sean Monahan goes from Montreal to Winnipeg. Now, is this a very deep center, class right now? No, not really. But I think so there's not a ton of centers out there. The few that potentially could have been, they're already gone pre-deadline. And by the way,
for very high prices.
Yeah. But look, I mean, Vancouver's they were neck and neck with the Bruins in the standings, and they've acquired pre-deadline 2 players that I thought the Bruins, should have been at least considering at some point if it could work out, and that's Nikita Zadorov on the blue line and Elias Lindholm. And Vancouver was already having a great year, and they had those 2 guys, and kudos to them. But as far as the Bruins go, and you can sit there and argue, the Bruins were right to not be in those players, and that's totally subjective and fine. I'm not going to argue that, but the reality is those players are off the board. And if you're the Bruins, I think you're trying to target a Middleton type defenseman, like we've talked about, potentially a Pat Maroon type character, tough guy. And I don't mean tough guy like fighting like he's from the Danbury Trashers. I'm talking just like have that presence in your lineup for the playoffs, and then try to get another middle 6 forward. And I think those are attainable assets. You're probably giving up some middle round picks, and maybe I don't know, but that's what the Bruins should target. And with certain players off the board now, it should be more apparent. Problem is, everybody is probably going to be fighting for the same, couple fish, I think, out there.
By the way, Brian, I saw someone wearing a Lowell Lock Monsters hat at the Bean Pot on Monday. So I figured you would like that.
I love that. So many thoughts on that. Scott, would you say the Lock Monsters uniforms were better when they were the affiliate of the Islanders or the Hurricanes? Because I like the Islanders ones. There was more color in them.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, you gotta have the purple in there for sure.
Yeah.
By the way, have you guys seen the Danbury Trashers documentary on Netflix?
Yeah, that was like a year or 2 ago, right?
Yeah, that was really good. Like ties to like organized crime and all that. That was
yeah. You got The Rock and Triple H showing up to a 10-year-old's birthday party in Connecticut. That's funny.
Sorry to take us off the tracks again. I've already done it at least twice today, but that's all right. Anyway, okay. Scott, you were talking?
No, not really. I was just bringing up the Danbury Trashers. I don't even remember what topic we were on, honestly.
No, we're talking about the
trade deadline.
the certain players that are off the market now and whatnot.
Yeah, gone. Yeah, so it's fascinating with Lindholm. It's like our last episode. I know we talked about that Athletic proposal of was it Frederick, Poitras, and a first round pick. And as it turns out, that is what it would have taken. Like that's arguably even more than that. That basically is what Vancouver gave up. That, you know, Andrei Kuzmenko, who by the way just scored against the Bruins on Tuesday in his Calgary debut, you know, that's a guy who had almost 80 points last year. I know he's having a down season, but he is a talented player. First round pick, a conditional fourth round pick, two defense prospects. Only one of them I'd say was a real prospect, but you know, probably just like a notch below like a tier 1 prospect. Like not quite an elite prospect, but I'm blanking on the kid's name, but he's a top scoring defenseman in the OHL right now. So, you know, it would have been a really big package that the Bruins would have to given up. And then even Monahan goes for a first round pick, which I would not have given up for him, honestly. Great job by Montreal. They got a first round pick from Calgary just to take on his contract, played him big minutes, played him in power play, you know, kind of built his career back up, got his numbers up, and then they flip him for a first round pick. So, yeah, pretty crazy prices there. Like, my take, you know, I tweeted this, but I'll say it here. Like, if I'm the Bruins, I'm fine with waiting out that sort of early flurry and seeing where prices go, because right now they are at pretty crazy high levels. And I think you're going to see more of an arms race out west, whereas last year it was all the Eastern teams loading up, and including the Bruins, obviously. This year it felt like, you know, Vancouver makes that trade because they know that Winnipeg and Colorado are also in on them. Then Winnipeg turns around and says, well, we have to get the next best center because Colorado's still around on whoever's left. And so they pounce. You know, Colorado's looking for an upgrade. There's been talk all year about how, you know, Ryan Johansson hasn't really worked out as their second line center. So they're looking for something there. So I kind of feel like the Bruins and other Eastern teams are probably going to sit back and let all those Western teams like throw first round picks around and make some big deals. And, you know, then they'll kind of hope there's maybe some value left on the board somewhere.
Scott, who was it that you were saying wouldn't trade his first round pick because he wanted to go to the draft? And I forget who that was.
Oh, yeah, the Rangers. So Elliot Friedman, I guess, alluded to this on 32 Thoughts. James Dolan, the owner of the Rangers, Knicks, MSG, also owns the Sphere in Las Vegas, where the 2024 draft is going to be held. And basically what Friedman insinuated was that Dolan wants the Rangers to keep their first round picks so that the Rangers can be part of the round 1 first night activities at the draft, because it's at the Sphere, which sounds insane. Sounds like an absolutely crazy reason to not trade a first round pick when you're one of the top teams in the league. But also, given that it's Dolan, he is very superficial, really makes all the sense in the world coming from that camp.
Yeah, that's all one. Right. That's one that you're gonna have a hard time explaining to your head coach and your management team, and we're like, oh, so we can't use the first. Okay, all right, all right. It's all about having that fun party at the Sphere. You own it. Just go anywhere. Like, what? I don't get it. You can do whatever you want. You freaking own the place. So, oh god.
Speaking of party atmosphere, and I might be wrong here, but I think we might be kind of finishing up on the Bruins topics. I know we're only 40 minutes in, but speaking of party atmosphere, the All-Star festivities in Toronto, I did want to get to those because there was definitely a couple storylines coming out of there. And I was curious, for you guys, was there a main storyline or takeaway from, because it's not just the All-Star game and the competition and whatnot. Certain principals in the NHL make themselves available to the media. I don't know if you saw any interviews or heard anything that kind of struck your ear. I have one in mind, but I'll throw it to you guys. The Nikita Kucherov situation, just the overall, the All-Star weekend in general, just thoughts on it, storylines, takeaways.
You said party atmosphere.
Yeah,
so-
I was gonna say Bridget is definitely adding to the party atmosphere on YouTube. She has a light behind her that is really just going crazy. So Brian, mine might be the same as yours, but for me, the biggest news really had nothing to do with the All-Star game, but it's that the NHL is returning to the Olympics in 2026 and 2030, which was expected, but is now great to have that on the record and official. There will also be in 2025, they're calling it the Four Nations Face-Off between US, Canada, Sweden, Finland. They didn't announce the host cities, but there was a report that Boston and Montreal are the two kind of leading candidates to host that tournament, which on the one hand is, pretty exciting. We'll get to see some elite international hockey at the Garden if that happens. On the other hand, the real bummer is that the Czech Republic is not part of that tournament. So you don't get to see David Pastrnak, the biggest star in Boston.
You should have it shouldn't be four nations. It should be like Canada, US, like Northern Europe, Eastern Europe. Like, you know what I mean? Like this region of Europe, that region of Europe. Like in the past, it has been Team North America versus, Team Europe. But yeah, you're missing out on some really good players if you're taking away like Slovakia, Czech Republic. Like there's plenty of other people from that part of Europe that you could have figured out, I think, a way to get in.
Well, and Scott, how presumptuous of you to assume that it would be the TD Garden? What if it's Hockey Town or Warrior?
What if it's Songus Center?
Yeah, I mean, so
Connor McDavid just banking pucks off the giant wall at Hockey Town.
The brick wall. It's like Gretzky 3D hockey 97. So how do you guys feel about? I mean, what's the logic behind it? Because I read, I forget who it was. It was a Boston journalist. Maybe it was Matt Poitras, but mentioned
I think it was. Assuming you're going where I think you're going.
Yeah. As to why it would be the four teams, and you want to take it away, Scott?
Yeah, so the main reason is that this is a completely NHL owned and operated tournament, which means it's going to be all NHL players. And those are the only four countries with enough NHL players to fill out an entire roster. As Matt Poitras pointed out, there's actually only 3 defensemen from the Czech Republic in the NHL right now. So that's obviously not enough for a team. On the one hand, I get that. On the other, it still seems pretty silly to me. Like, I'm sure there's a couple floating around the AHL, or if you have to go to like Canadian Juniors or NCAA or whatever. Like, you can figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, prospects that were drafted count like as NHL.
Yeah.
Well, they could also do something like they did for the for the World Cup of Hockey or the whatever it was back in like 2016. Like maybe, to Bridget's point, maybe you do US, Canada, Finland, Sweden, and then you do a Team Europe and the 23 and under or something like that.
And of course, I should also mention like the other elephant in the room here is Russia's not a part of this tournament. Obviously, you could fill out a full Russia roster, but they remain banned from international competition because of the war in Ukraine. The IIHF president said there would be a decision on Russia's potential involvement in the 2026 Olympics, coming at some point, but that will obviously include the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, in addition to just the hockey bosses.
And Russia's been banned in the past, not for even wars, but for just like doping at like extreme levels. And there's been so many reasons they've not been in the Olympics, or they've had to compete under the Russian Olympic Committee flag or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Which is like another option where they're not officially Team Russia, but it's still, a Russian team.
I think Russia aside, and again, that's the whole Russia involvement thing. It's doesn't matter like what you think about it. Like that's just the reality of the situation. So that's why we don't mention them. But like I think there's definitely a way to ice 6 teams. Like I said, you do US, Canada, Finland, Sweden, and then to match that, right? Like to match those powerhouses. Yeah, you have a Team Europe that has, like a Pasternak and a Draisaitl, teams that can't fill out a full roster. So you give them a couple superstars here and there, and then if you can ice a 23 and under type roster, you do that too. Like the Team North America. International best on best is better than nothing. But you do kind of wish like you would get a little bit more than the 4 teams. But as it pertains to the Olympics, so 2026, forgive me for not knowing where those winter games
Italy,
are.
it's in Italy. I want to go so bad.
She had that one ready to go.
It's really hard. Yes, I've looked into it. If you can tell,
What city?
It's technically like considered 2 cities, but the main one is Milan. But then it's also like in the mountainside of like northern Italy, like for all the skiing events and like the, there's some really beautiful places to ski up in the Italian Alps.
Cortina d'Ampezzo, which has hosted the Winter Olympics in the past. But yeah, now that'll be the mountain home, and Milan will be all the indoor sports. Get them to a
so that would have been
would,
20 years since Torino held the Olympics.
Yeah, and I there's a player for BU's women's team who's on the Italian national team and has been since she was like 15. So she'll be getting to play like pretty much in her hometown, which would be pretty cool. I would love to broadcast some women's hockey in the Olympics. So that's why I've already looked into it. So I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but I'm like, oh, I could go to Italy this time. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I would love to. Like, Italy's on my list of places I want to get to anyways. So I don't know that. I don't think it's going to be in the WEI budget.
Scott, we could take a skate pod road trip.
Budget, but
we could take a skate pod road trip. Well, I'm hoping someone pays me to go. That's what I'm hoping for. But anyway, I'll go to Italy. I'll find the money for Italy no matter what. I've been to Italy so many times. I was there in September. That's like one of my favorite places to go. So
maybe you'll be broadcasting.
That's what I hope.
So my first reaction, it's like you wish that your reaction would be like excitement, and it is, but my initial reaction is just like, well, yeah, it's about time. Like it's annoying because it's still 2 years away, and it's like, the best player, the current best players in the world, like will all be approaching 30, right? Like the McDavids, Draisaitl, Pasternak, Matthews, like all these guys, they're already they'll be approaching 30, and then you got to wait another 4 years after that. So, in all actuality, all these players will, you'll get a couple Olympics out of these players because they'll still be representing their countries in their mid-30s. But you just wish that this was all of their second Olympics. You wish you had one more Olympics with these players on best, and it should have been 2022.
Because now it's basically it's going to be one with all those guys in their prime, which is going to be awesome. But it should have been 2. Like 2022, all these guys were at the start of their primes, and you really, you probably missed the crossover of, you might have had Austin Matthews and Patrick Kane on the top line. I don't know if Kane's still going to be going in 2026. Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby, like both still at an elite level. Now, look, maybe Crosby will still be at an elite level in 2026. I'm not putting anything past that guy, but he'll be 38, 39. So,
oh my God, that makes me feel so old. Oh God.
And as it directly ties to the Bruins, Brad Marchand still has never been to the Olympics, and obviously would have been a lock for Canada for the last 2, but the NHL didn't go. So now, he already said, we talked to him about it on Sunday, I think, or maybe Monday. He said, that is a goal. He's already, made it a point to make that a goal of his, to still be playing at a high enough level, and by 2026 to to make that team, but it's no with the talent that Canada has, there's no question like that's tough. Like that's to make that team at age 37 would be incredibly impressive. And again, a guy who is as driven as Marchand, I'm not going to put anything past him, but it would suck. Like it would suck if his game does drop off just enough to where he misses out on that team. And you're talking about. I think Brad Marchand is going to be a Hall of Famer, and he may very well never get to play in the Olympics, which sucks.
That last one hurt. Like that last one looked like they were going, and then all of a sudden, and like towards the end, it was like no, actually, because like COVID cases started going up. I'm still upset about it. And by the way, that would have been Bergeron's last one. That like there's a lot of like that would have been McAvoy's first. Like that would have been. There would have been a lot of really interesting storylines. Boston would have been heavily represented as well. So like there would have been a lot of different teams to watch if you're a Bruins fan. That one hurt. And I'm someone who once it's Olympic time, don't even talk to me about anything else. Because like when I was in college, I forget what the hell Olympics was that? I don't know. It was
would have been 2014, right? Sochi?
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been. I was in class. I don't think I learned anything those 2 weeks. I had my laptop open to hockey only. I was awake at 3 a.m. watching hockey, driving my roommate insane, driving my boyfriend insane. I didn't care. I didn't want to talk about anything besides the Olympics.
Well, so when is the to that point? I feel like Sochi was, and the last two Olympics was that the players were in, the NHL players. It was Sochi. It was Vancouver. Vancouver was North America. Yeah, I was gonna say, when's the last time NHL players were playing the Olympics in North America so we could watch them at normal times? But yeah, it was Vancouver, and then so Salt Lake City was the last U.S. host, right? I don't know how far in advance they plan them. I don't know if it's even on the.
Well, I know.
Didn't Georgia have a bid?
What was that?
Didn't Georgia have a bid, like Atlanta or some?
Well, that would have been summer.
Yeah,
maybe. But yeah, I know Salt Lake City is putting together a bid for 2030, which they haven't selected yet. So you could see it back in the U.S. in 6 years.
That was. I don't know where you guys were, but so the Sochi Olympics were college, but the Vancouver Olympics, I was in high school, and so like that was fun to watch.
Sidney Crosby game winner, gold medal overtime. Zach Parise scored with like 2.5 seconds left in regulation, and then Crosby scored in overtime.
Yeah, that was backbreaking. I was in college for that one.
I was the biggest Sidney Crosby fan in high school. I said I want Team USA to win unless Sidney Crosby scores the game winner, and I was happy. It was a good game. It was a great game.
Well, and 2010 on the women's side, Canada beat the US in overtime, and it was Marie-Philippe Poulin who scored the winner, and she was a BU student at the time. So it was like It was crazy because it's like, man, like I've been to a bunch of her games at Walter Brown, and like there she is. I think she was 19 at that point. I mean, she's still one of the best players in the world. 14 years later.
Yeah, I just broadcast
that was really
the
start of it.
I just broadcast her game. What was it? Sunday, because Montreal. She plays for Montreal. They were playing Boston at Tsonga Center.
Yep, and then Torino was in 06. I think the U.S. were in and out of that tournament quicker than my algebra test lasted that week. And then 2002, that was in my lifetime. The 2002 Olympics were I think the funnest ones to watch because I was under 10 years old. But that was just such a fun tournament. Like you go play like NHL 03 with Jerome McGinley on the cover back in this is how long ago we're talking. I think. Vanessa Carlton was the top hit of the year back then. That was a fun tournament. I mean, that Team Canada was stacked. Bridget, I'm just trying to get people, the pop culture references. So,
Vanessa Carlton, my God,
that was a mouse, But that Team Canada was absurd. You look at that roster. I mean, I kind of want to pull it up, but it was filthy, and the U.S. team was sick too.
You want to know one of my other favorite Olympic memories was TJ Oshie just crapping on people in the shootouts. Like TJ Oshie just keep sending them.
How in God's green earth was that 10 years ago? Holy smokes. What is going on? All right. Also, I did want to bring up the Kucherov thing. What were your thoughts on that? Personally, I don't care. I do think he's a bit of a jackass for it. Like, because nobody wants to be, none of those players want to be at the All-Star game or the All-Star weekend. First of all, it should be an honor. The All-Star weekend festivities have plummeted significantly, in my opinion, in the last 15, 20 years. It's not what it used to be. That said, nobody wants to be there. We all know it's a fake weekend. It's kind of a mockery. But to make a mockery of a mockery, it's kind of just like, dude, nobody wants to be there. Like, don't flatter yourself.
Yeah, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I don't care too much. But yeah, in the moment, it's like, I don't know, put in an honest effort at least. Like, I do think most of the guys in that skills competition were pretty into it for the most part. I think as it went on and some guys fell further back, you kind of tell, maybe some guys started losing interest who didn't have a chance of winning the $1 million anymore. But
hell, I would work my ass off for an extra $1 million. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot to them, but also they don't get paid like NBA players. They're not making $56 million a year. Like, $1 million, don't ever just be like, nah, I don't need it.
I mean, even for the top guys, it's like that's an extra 10% almost added to your salary. Like that's
I think sometimes like these guys and John Buccigross had a tweet that was pretty long and but it was thoughtful. But like when I think sometimes these players can lose sight potentially like the masses that you reach with who you are. And like when I was younger, my favorite team was, maybe it was because of the movies, but my favorite team when I was young was the Mighty Ducks because of the movies and the uniforms. And Paul Kariya was my favorite player. I wore number 9 because he was my favorite player to watch. Not even so much a fashion segment, Bridget, but thanks for having the trigger. But like my point is, like, if I was younger and say I went to the 1996 NHL All-Star game in skills competition, and I saw Paul Kariya like just like looking miserable and not trying, because you're a kid, I don't think you cared too much because you don't really know what's going on. But my point is, like, you have kids in the Air Canada Center that are like, he's probably their favorite player, and it's like, can you not like just like put on an effort for like the kids that are there? Like, that's who it's for. It's not for you. It's not for the parents paying for the seats. It's for the kids in the audience. No.
Yeah, I agree. And again, ultimately, I think people still had plenty to watch and be like Connor McDavid obviously put on a show. Makar, McKinnon were great. A couple of the Toronto guys were in it until pretty late, so the hometown crowd had something to cheer about. And yeah, it was kind of bizarre to see because it was like he clearly just gave up. And that was like the end of his night. Like other guys struggled in the like the target shooting, the accuracy. Like Pasternak struggled a little bit in that one, and then Leon Draisaitl really struggled and took like a minute to hit all 4. But it's like you could tell he was at least trying. For whatever reason, he just didn't have a shot going. But yeah, I mean, Kucherov just totally mailed it in. Which
I don't know about you guys, but like if you're already forced to be there, like you're there, what the hell does it hurt you to just like expend some energy for 5 minutes? Like that's what I don't get. Like if I'm in a location and I'm already there, I'm there. Like I'm doing it the right way because otherwise, like, why even be there? So that's my thing. Like what did it hurt to do it? I also really could care less. He's not someone that I was particularly interested in how he was going to do in that, but whatever. Like,
yeah.
I think one of the funniest tweets to come out of the weekend though is someone quote tweeted that video and just put like, "This is Pierre-Luc Dubois every game."
He's bouncing around team to team and no coach seems to like him. But that is hilarious though.
Well, now he's got another coach to try because the Kings fired theirs. Not that it was all because of Dubois. Obviously, that whole team is just falling apart. But that was another, fairly league story over the break.
Yeah, and he was someone that we talked about last deadline. Like, I don't know. Good thing that didn't come to fruition. But
You feel like he's one of the players Doughty was talking about when he was like, players are in it for themselves and whatnot.
That was like, we don't hear that in Boston at all. So when I heard and I don't even hear that in like college. I don't know. That's the first time in a while I've heard someone just completely throw their team under the bus like that. And you want to know what? I wouldn't even call it throwing him under the bus. He's being honest. Like, you just don't really usually see it play out in the media, but he's clearly frustrated and just like totally had it with their shit.
Yeah, it's like you might expect, John Tortorella to say that at some point, but like not a player, not about his teammates. And obviously Drew Doughty has the cachet to say that, especially with that franchise. Like he knows what a team that is committed like a cup contender looks like. So good on him on calling it out, but
I would love to see him just like yelling at those guys in the locker room, like whoever that was directed at. Like, I want a follow-up video of him being like, "Yeah, I was talking about you." Like, fucking try harder.
One final takeaway I had from All-Star Weekend was Gary Bettman speaking with the media and being kind of asked about NHL expansion, relocation, and boy, he doesn't seem like he's in a rush to get Quebec a hockey team or anybody. Basically, his tenor was, I don't care who you are, where you are, you got to fill out certain requirements and be willing to pay the piper. And if you do that, I'll be interested in you.
From what I understand, and this is from like a source, like not that I have many, but they actually are really not like, they'll entertain the idea of adding Quebec, but I was told they'll never go back to Quebec. Never. Like, doesn't matter about the facility. I was told that it's not an option to go back to Quebec City for, believe it or not, like political reasons. So I don't 100% understand it, but there's like there's some politicking that has to do with Quebec City and I think French Canadian people in general, my people. But yeah, like someone was telling me that like it's not as bad anymore, at least as far as I know, but like there's like a real separatist movement there at certain times throughout like Quebec's history, where it's like, we don't even want to be part of Canada. So
yeah, I mean that's always been there. I think
yes,
it would definitely have to be a relocation. Like, I don't think it would never be an expansion team that goes to Quebec. I don't think. The problem is like, yeah, you think any Canadian market, okay, obviously they're going to be passionate, they're going to care, there's going to be fans, but internationally or at like a league-wide level, they are outside of Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, like they are relatively small markets. And you even see that in Winnipeg, who is like bottom third of the league in attendance this year with a really good team. And it's like, because they have a small building and they're not even filling it. And it's like, okay, well, if Winnipeg itself isn't coming out, like, then where's the interest league-wide? Like, you're not putting Winnipeg on national TV games despite how good they are, because there just isn't that wider attention or care for that market. Well, and Quebec would be the same way.
And it's just like literally per capita, there's fewer people that could go, or like fewer people that would watch. Like,
you guys think Quebec would have trouble filling those stadium those seats?
I don't think
not initially. Not initially. That they'd probably immediately sell out for 3 years. But if they're not a playoff team year 4, 5, 6, then what happened? Like, is the interest going to stay there? Because if it starts to go south, like it's hard to get it back, and there just isn't enough attention and care like for that market to keep a team there, afloat or relevant or whatever. It's like that team has to be a contender to really make an impact at like a league-wide level.
But is that a Quebec thing, or is that just in general? Because I mean, we saw it here in Boston. They had a couple down years, and it took until a playoff push in 07-08 for the Garden to get full again. It was half full for about 2 or 3 years there after the lockout. I mean, Arizona, they finally sold out when they moved to a 2,000 seat college rink. You can't tell me,
It's
not
one way
that you
to
were
sell
saying
out.
this,
It's one
not that
way
you're
to-
saying this, but like, I mean, there's a lot of markets where if the team's not good, the interest will go right to college football or anything really. I don't know why
Yeah,
Quebec
but
would be.
well, I think the difference is that like with Boston, there's a baseline where it's like even if they're a fringe playoff team, you can throw them on national TV and people will tune in. And obviously, there's only a certain number of markets that are like that, but it does make it tougher. And like, let's just be honest, the US TV market is way bigger than the Canadian TV market. So the NHL cares more about US viewership. Like that's just the financials of it. So I think they're always gonna be biased towards US markets, which to bring this all the way back around, if there is going to be a new city that gets a team at any point, right now it's going to be Salt Lake City, and it would most likely be with Arizona relocating, which sounds like something that could be coming towards a head. Frank Saravalli reported on, I think this was on Tuesday, that like a decision on Arizona's future could come as early as this weekend. Like it seems like things are really kind of at very quickly getting to a point of no return where it's like they better have a plan in place and shovels in the ground or a new arena, or they're on the move. Because I don't know if you guys heard Marty Walsh, who's obviously former Boston mayor and now NHLPA president or whatever his title is. He like ripped into Arizona and the Coyotes and was like basically said it's an embarrassment and this has to be figured out because playing 4 or 5 more years at Mullet Arena is just straight up not an option.
I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like it should have ever been an option, but
No.
like, it's yeah, it's like how many? What's the capacity? Like 2,000? Like that's
For
fewer than.
hockey, it's like 44,000 or 4,500 or something.
Okay, that's smaller than the Songa Center.
Yeah.
That's less like for people who like want a frame of reference. That's smaller than a lot of the Hockey East rinks.
Hey, we love Songus on this podcast.
Yeah, we do. I'm saying relocate the Coyotes to the Songa Center.
Yeah.
There we go. Problem solved.
The little Coyotes. I like that. It's got a nice little ring to it. Every game's an away game
There's
for them.
plenty of freaking Coyotes around here, I'll tell you that. So it would make sense.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, no, I mean, all good points, Scott. I know the NHL. They obviously prioritize the US market. I get that. I just there's so many rivalries to be had with Quebec. I mean, imagine if just hypothetically, say the Florida Panthers moved up to Quebec City, and you got Barkov and Reinhart and Matthew Tkachuk, representing Quebec City, and they're playing Toronto and Montreal and Boston. I just love that so much.
I would love it for sure. I love Quebec City. So
it's so nice.
I have to make some trips up there. That'd be great.
It's such a great city. Yeah.
People.
I guess like here's where I'll leave it. Like I understand they prioritize the US market. As long as you're gonna have Canadian teams, like for example Winnipeg, like I'd rather them be in Quebec City than Winnipeg. They're never not gonna have Canadian markets. So one of those, I'd rather it be Quebec over Winnipeg. Maybe that's the easy switch, but I don't know if that would ever happen. In any event, Bridget, Scott, we've gone a little bit long here. Boy, an hour and 10 minutes. We talked about the Bruins for about 35. So
I was done after my opening shift. I was just like, nah.
Yeah.
But maybe we never talked about the Philly cheesesteaks, thank God, because I'm still hungry. And thanks for not bringing up food at any point in time, because I haven't.
Well, this is the second time today Bridget's brought up food and telling us not to bring up food. Yeah. So maybe I think we need a new banner at the bottom for food segments. But
yeah.
In the meantime, I think that probably wraps up. Do you have anything left to talk about?
No, other than quick look ahead. Like you got the Vancouver Canucks, team with the best record in the NHL, coming in on Thursday, and should be a marquee matchup. But obviously, the Bruins are going to have to bring a much better effort than what they showed on Tuesday.
Absolutely. All right, Scott. Thanks for your time, Bridget. You keep party rocking over there, and We will talk to you all on.
Good luck in your search for your secret admirer.
Yeah, guys. If anyone, leave a comment if it was you.
Hey, be careful what you wish for over there. Be careful what you wish for. But yeah,
I don't think any
anyway.
of our viewers know where I live, but that's so.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Hopefully not. I'd be a little concerned.
Let's hope not.
This is from Scott. Is this from you?
I'll never
Was
tell.
it for Women in Sports Night, but it showed up a day late? Okay.
Oh, brother.
It was definitely Scott.
Maria in Watertown, if it was you, please speak up. All right. That'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you Friday morning after the Bruins Canucks. Take care. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching this Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.